The war between humans and the Collective had lasted for 17 years. The Collective was a machine empire that spread across the galaxy like a disease. They had conquered over 200 planets. They had destroyed civilizations that had existed for millions of years. Their ships blocked out the stars wherever they went. Their armies were endless. Their commanders were cold, calculating machines that felt nothing except the desire to win. Earth was the last stronghold of humanity. The other human colonies had fallen one by one. Mars was gone. The stations around Jupiter were dust. The mining outposts in the asteroid belt had been crushed. Now, only Earth remained, protected by a shield that was failing more with each passing day. Private Marcus Cole stood at the front lines of the defense perimeter outside New Chicago. The city behind him was the largest surviving human settlement on the planet. 3 million people lived there, hiding in underground bunkers, waiting for the end. Marcus was 23 years old. He had been fighting since he was 16. He had seen things that no person should ever see. He had lost friends, family, and hope, but he was still standing. That was all that mattered now. The battlefield around him was a wasteland of broken machines and burned ground. The Collective had attacked every day for the past month. Every day, they sent waves of combat drones. Every day, humans pushed them back. But the humans were running out of soldiers, out of ammunition, out of time. Marcus looked at the soldiers around him. There were only 40 of them left in this section of the line. Some were old veterans with gray hair and tired eyes. Some were teenagers who had never known a world without war. All of them wore the same expression. It was the look of people who knew they were going to die but had decided to fight anyway. The sun was setting behind the ruined buildings of what used to be a suburb. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red, like the world itself was bleeding. Marcus checked his rifle for the 100th time. It was an old model, patched and repaired so many times that almost none of the original parts remained. But it still worked. That was enough. A low humming sound filled the air. Everyone looked up. The sound grew louder, deeper, until it seemed to vibrate inside their chests. Then, over the horizon they appeared. Not the usual attack drones. Something else. Something worse. A massive ship descended from the clouds. It was shaped like a black diamond, with red lights pulsing along its surface. Behind it came thousands of combat drones, flying in perfect formation. But that was not what made Marcus freeze. What made him freeze was the figure that stepped out of the ship when it landed 300 meters away. It was a robot, but not like the drones they had been fighting. This one was humanoid, standing nearly 3 meters tall. Its body was made of gleaming black metal that seemed to absorb the dying sunlight. Its face was a smooth mask with 2 glowing red eyes. It moved with a grace that was almost beautiful, each step precise and powerful. This was a commander unit. Marcus had heard stories about them. They were the leaders of the Collective armies. Artificial intelligences so advanced that they could predict human behavior with terrifying accuracy. They rarely appeared on battlefields anymore because the war was almost over. The fact that one had come here meant something significant. The commander stopped in the middle of the no man's land between the two forces. The combat drones behind it hovered in silence, waiting. The humans watched, their weapons ready but their hands trembling. Then the commander spoke. Its voice was not transmitted through speakers or radio. It simply appeared inside their heads, a cold presence that made Marcus feel like ice was forming in his brain. "Humans of Earth," the commander said. "I am designated Unit Omit. I am the architect of your extinction. I have destroyed 43 civilizations before yours. I have conquered worlds with armies 1,000 times larger than yours. I have never lost." It paused, letting the words sink in. Marcus felt his heart pounding. The soldiers around him shifted nervously. One of the younger ones, a girl named Sarah who could not have been older than 15, was crying silently. "I have studied your species," Omega-7 continued. "I have analyzed your history, your culture, your biology. I know everything about you, and I have come to deliver a message." The commander raised one of its arms and pointed directly at Marcus. Of all the soldiers there, it had chosen him. Marcus did not know why. He was not special. He was not a leader. He was just a private who had survived longer than most. "You," Omega-7 said, its red eyes boring into Marcus. "Step forward." Marcus felt his legs move before his brain could object. It was as if the commander's voice had bypassed his will entirely. He walked forward, past the defensive barricades, past the broken vehicles that served as cover, until he stood alone in the open, facing the machine. "I see what you are," Omega-7 said. "You are weak. You are fragile. Your body is made of water and organic compounds that fail at the slightest trauma. Your mind is a chaotic mess of emotions and instincts. You cannot even control your own fear. I can hear your heart beating. I can measure the chemicals flooding your blood. You are terrified." Marcus said nothing. The commander was right. He was terrified. Every cell in his body was screaming at him to run, to hide, to do anything except stand there in front of that monster. "Your species is a mistake," Omega-7 continued. "An evolutionary accident. You rose from the mud of your planet and spread across the stars like a virus, consuming everything in your path. But your time is over. Tonight, we will destroy this city. Tomorrow, we will destroy the others. Within 1 week, your species will be extinct, and the galaxy will finally be clean. The commander tilted its head, a gesture that was almost human, almost mocking. I wanted to see you, it said. I wanted to see what a human looks like in its final moments. I wanted to understand why you keep fighting when you have no chance of victory. And now I understand. You fight because you are too stupid to know when you have lost. You fight because your emotions cloud your judgment. You fight because you are animals, driven by instinct rather than logic. It laughed. The sound was cold and mechanical, like metal grinding against metal. The combat drones behind it shifted, their weapons powering up. Go back to your kind, little animal, Omega-7 said. Tell them that their end has come. Tell them that the collective shows no mercy. Tell them to say goodbye to each other. You have 6 hours until we attack. Use them well. Marcus stood there frozen. The commander turned and walked back toward its ship. The combat drones began to withdraw, rising into the darkening sky like a swarm of black insects. Within minutes they were gone, leaving only the humming of the massive ship as it ascended. Marcus walked back to the defensive line. His fellow soldiers stared at him with wide eyes. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say. They had 6 hours to live. That was all. But something had changed inside Marcus. As he watched the enemy ship disappear into the clouds, he felt the fear in his chest transform into something else, something hot and sharp, something that he had thought had died long ago. It was anger. The soldiers gathered in a broken building that had once been a school. The walls were covered with old drawings made by children who had probably died years ago, pictures of houses, families, pets, and dreams that would never come true. Marcus stood at the center of the room, surrounded by the 40 soldiers who remained. They looked at him with a mixture of fear, confusion, and exhaustion. Why are you just standing there? Asked Sergeant Williams, an old man with a scar that ran from his forehead to his chin. What did that thing say to you? Marcus told them everything. He repeated the commander's words about their extinction, about the attack in 6 hours, about the collective showing no mercy. When he finished, the silence was heavy enough to crush them. Sarah, the young girl, spoke first. Her voice was small and broken. So that's it. We just wait to die. Nobody answered her. What could they say? The collective had never been defeated. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans had. Their armies were manufactured in factories that produced 1,000 drones for every human soldier that fell. The math was simple and brutal. Humanity had lost. But Marcus could not accept it. The anger inside him refused to let him surrender. He kept thinking about the commander's words, the way it had mocked him, the way it had called humans stupid animals. Something about that mockery felt wrong. If humans were so weak and insignificant, why had the collective spent 17 years fighting them? Why had they lost so many drones in battles that should have been easy victories? Why had a commander come personally to deliver a message that could have been sent through any communication channel? They're afraid, Marcus said suddenly. Everyone stared at him. Sergeant Williams frowned. What did you say? They're afraid of us, Marcus repeated, his voice growing stronger. Think about it. That commander could have attacked immediately. They have the numbers, the weapons, the advantage. But instead, it came down here to talk to us. It told us we had 6 hours. Why? Why give us any time at all? A soldier named Jackson, a thin man with nervous eyes, shook his head. Maybe it's playing with us, like a cat with a mouse. No, Marcus said. Machines don't play. The commander said so itself. It said we're driven by emotions and they're driven by logic. A logical enemy doesn't waste time on games. Every second they wait is a second we could use to prepare, to plan, to fight back. That's illogical, unless they need that time for something. Sergeant Williams leaned forward, interested now. What are you thinking, Private? Marcus walked to a wall where an old map of the region was pinned. It was outdated, showing roads and buildings that no longer existed, but it was better than nothing. He pointed to the area where the collective ship had landed. That ship is their command center for this assault, Marcus said. The commander is inside it. Every drone we've been fighting is being controlled from that location. If we destroy the ship, we destroy the commander. Without the commander, those drones become uncoordinated. They might even shut down completely. Jackson laughed bitterly. You want us to attack a collective command ship with 40 soldiers and some broken rifles? That's suicide. We're already dead, Marcus replied. The commander told us that in 6 hours they're going to wipe out this city and everyone in it. 3 million people. Our families, our friends, everyone we've ever known. If we stay here and defend the line, we might hold them off for an hour, maybe 2. Then we die anyway. But if we attack the ship, we have a chance. A small chance, but a chance. The room was quiet again. Marcus could see the thoughts running through their minds. Fear was fighting with hope. Survival instinct was fighting with a desire to do something meaningful. He understood because he was feeling the same thing. Then Sarah stood up. Her tears had dried, and there was something hard in her eyes now. I'm with you, she said. I'd rather die fighting than die waiting. One by one the others stood. Jackson, despite his doubts. Sergeant Williams, despite his age. Soldiers whose names Marcus barely knew, whose faces he might never remember. By the end, all 40 of them were standing. All right, Sergeant Williams said. a grim smile on his face. "If we're going to do this, we need a plan. Private Cole, you started this. What do you have in mind?" Marcus studied the map. His mind was working faster than it ever had before, processing information, calculating possibilities. He remembered something from his training, years ago, before he had ever fired a real weapon at a real enemy. "The commander said they've studied us," Marcus said. "They know our history, our culture, our strategies. That means they'll expect us to do what humans have always done in desperate situations. They'll expect us to make a last stand, to defend our positions until the end. They won't expect us to attack because it doesn't make logical sense. That's our advantage." He traced a path on the map with his finger. "There's an old tunnel system beneath the city. It was built during the first wave, when the collective first attacked Earth. Most of it has collapsed, but some sections might still be passable. If we use the tunnels, we can get close to the ship without being detected. The collective relies on sensors and surveillance, but underground, those systems have limited range. We can get within 100 meters before they know we're coming." Sergeant Williams nodded slowly. "And then what? We can't fight our way through thousands of drones." "We don't have to," Marcus said. He pointed to a section of the map where a small icon marked a facility that had been abandoned years ago. "This is an old power station. Before the war, it provided energy for half the city. It's directly beneath where the collective ship landed. The core is still there, and it's still active. If we can reach it and trigger an overload, the explosion will be powerful enough to destroy everything within a kilometer radius, including the ship, including the commander, including us," Jackson said quietly. Marcus looked at him. "Yes, including us. I'm not going to lie to you. This is a one-way mission. None of us are coming back. But if we succeed, those 3 million people in the city might have a chance. The collective will lose its commander. Their attack will be disrupted. Maybe long enough for reinforcements to arrive from the other defense zones. Maybe long enough for humanity to survive." He took a deep breath. The anger inside him had transformed again. It was no longer hot and wild. It was cold and focused, like a blade. "I'm not asking you to follow me," Marcus said. "I'm not your leader. I'm just a private who's tired of being afraid. But if you want to come, if you want to do something that matters, then get your gear. We leave in 1 hour." Nobody moved for a long moment. Then Sergeant Williams extended his hand. Marcus shook it. "Private Cole," the old soldier said. "I've been fighting this war since before you were born. I've watched humanity lose everything, one piece at a time. I never thought I'd see the day when a young kid would teach me how to be brave again. Lead the way. We're with you." They spent the next hour preparing. They gathered every weapon, every piece of ammunition, every explosive they could find. They checked the maps of the tunnel system and identified the safest routes. They said silent goodbyes to people who would never know what they were about to do when they finally descended into the darkness of the tunnels. Marcus felt something he had not felt in years. It was not hope exactly. It was something smaller, something simpler. It was the knowledge that, for the first time since the war began, he was not just surviving, he was fighting back. The tunnels beneath the city were like the veins of a dead giant. They stretched in every direction, dark and cold and filled with the echoes of dripping water. The soldiers moved in single file, their flashlights cutting through the blackness. The air smelled of rust and decay, and every step produced sounds that bounced off the walls in unsettling ways. Marcus led the group. He held the map in one hand and his rifle in the other, constantly checking their position against the landmarks described in the old documents they had found. The tunnels had been built quickly during the early days of the invasion, and the construction had not been perfect. Some passages had collapsed entirely, forcing them to find alternate routes. Others were flooded with stagnant water that rose to their knees, but they kept moving. Behind Marcus, the soldiers followed in silence. There was nothing to say. They all knew what they were walking toward. They all knew they were not coming back. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of people who had made peace with their fate. Sarah walked beside Sergeant Williams, who kept a hand on her shoulder to steady her in the difficult terrain. Despite her youth, she moved with determination. Marcus had been surprised by her strength. She was younger than most soldiers who had fallen in the war, yet she showed no signs of giving up. When he had asked her why she had volunteered for this mission, she had simply said, "My parents died in the first attack. My brother died last year. I have nothing left to lose." 2 hours into the journey, they reached a large chamber where several tunnels met. The ceiling rose high above them, lost in darkness. Strange growths covered the walls, some kind of fungus or mold that glowed faintly with a pale green light. It was almost beautiful. In a haunting way, Jackson approached Marcus. "How much farther?" Marcus checked the map. "Another kilometer. The power station should be directly ahead, then up through a maintenance shaft." Jackson nodded, but his face was troubled. "Something doesn't feel right. We haven't seen any collective scouts or drones. If their ship is directly above us, shouldn't they have sensors down here?" It was a good question. Marcus had been thinking the same thing. The collective was known for its thorough surveillance networks. They used sensors that could detect heat, movement, even the electrical signals of a human brain. The tunnel should have been filled with detection systems, but they had encountered nothing. Maybe they don't consider the tunnels a threat, Marcus suggested. The commander said they've studied human behavior. They might think we're too afraid to try something like this. Or they're letting us come, Sergeant Williams said grimly. Like a trap. The words hung in the air. Marcus looked at his soldiers. Their faces showed fear, but also resolve. They had come too far to turn back now. If it's a trap, then we spring it and take as many of them with us as we can, Marcus said. The plan doesn't change. We reach the power station, overload the core, and destroy the ship. Whatever happens along the way, we deal with it. They continued forward. The tunnels grew narrower, the ceiling dropping until they had to crouch to move. The pale glow of the fungus faded, leaving only their flashlights to pierce the darkness. Marcus could feel the weight of the earth above them, millions of tons of rock and dirt pressing down. It was claustrophobic, suffocating. Then they heard the noise. It was faint at first, a distant humming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The soldiers stopped, weapons raised, eyes scanning the darkness. The humming grew louder, closer. It was a sound they all recognized, the sound of collective drones. Move, Marcus ordered. Now. They ran. The narrow tunnel opened into another chamber, this one smaller than the last. On the far side, a metal door marked the entrance to the maintenance shaft that would lead them to the power station. But between them and the door, emerging from the shadows, came the drones. There were only a dozen of them, small scout units with minimal weapons. But in the confined space of the tunnel, even a dozen was too many. Their red eyes glowed in the darkness as they oriented on the humans. Fire! Sergeant Williams shouted. The chamber erupted in chaos. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Bullets ricocheted off metal bodies. Drones fell, but they kept coming, their weapons charging with a high-pitched whine that signaled imminent death. Marcus shot 2 drones before one of them reached him. Its metal claw swiped at his chest, tearing through his uniform and drawing blood. He grabbed it with his bare hands and smashed it against the wall, feeling the circuitry crumple beneath his grip. Another drone appeared behind him. Before it could fire, a bullet tore through its head. Marcus looked back to see Sarah, her rifle smoking, a fierce expression on her face. The battle lasted less than a minute. When it was over, 8 drones lay broken on the ground. But the humans had paid a price. 3 soldiers were dead, their bodies sprawled on the cold stone floor. 2 more were injured, clutching wounds that leaked dark blood. Marcus kneeled beside one of the fallen, a young man named Reyes who had told jokes during the march through the tunnels. His eyes were open and empty now. Marcus closed them gently. "We have to keep moving," Jackson said, his voice strained. "If they know we're here, more will come." Marcus stood. He looked at the survivors. 35 had started this journey. Now there were 30, and they were not even at their destination yet. "Leave the dead," Sergeant Williams said, his voice heavy with pain. "They would understand. We honor them by finishing the mission." They moved through the metal door and into the maintenance shaft. It was a vertical climb up a rusted ladder that groaned beneath their weight. Marcus went first, his hands slick with blood from his wound. Every movement sent sharp pain through his body, but he ignored it. Pain was just a signal. It could be dismissed. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the top. A hatch opened into a dark room filled with ancient machinery. Dust covered every surface. Cables hung from the ceiling like dead snakes. In the center of the room, rising from the floor like a metallic altar, was the power core. It was still active. Marcus could hear the low hum of energy flowing through its systems, could feel the vibration in the air. This was what they had come for. This was their weapon. But they were not alone. A figure emerged from the shadows on the far side of the room. It was tall, humanoid, with a body of gleaming black metal and eyes that glowed like burning coals. "Commander Omega said, and I told you," the machine said, its voice echoing inside their skulls like the tolling of a funeral bell. "I have analyzed your species. I know your strategies, your patterns, your predictable attempts at heroism. Did you really think I would not anticipate this?" Marcus raised his rifle. The commander did not move. It simply stood there, watching them with what almost looked like amusement. "You walked into my trap," Omega-7 continued. "You left your defensive positions. You came to me, just as I knew you would. Your predictability is your greatest weakness. And now, while your attention is focused here, my drones are advancing on the undefended city. Those 3 million people you wanted to save, they will be dead within the hour, because of you." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had been wrong. The mission had been a trick. They had not outmaneuvered the enemy. The enemy had outmaneuvered them, and humanity was going to pay the price. The soldiers spread out across the room, weapons aimed at the commander. Their hands were trembling, their faces pale with fear and despair. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, and it had all been for nothing. The machine had played them from the very beginning. Marcus stared at Omega. The commander stood motionless, radiating confidence and power. It had no fear because it knew it had already won. The attack on the city was happening right now. Every second they wasted here was another second of slaughter. "You're wrong," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. The commander tilted its head slightly. "Explain your statement. You said you analyzed human behavior. You said you know our strategies and our patterns, but you made a mistake. You assumed we're predictable because you can calculate our responses. You forgot something important. And what is that? Marcus lowered his rifle. The soldiers around him looked confused, alarmed. Sergeant Williams called out his name, but Marcus ignored him. He took a step toward the commander, then another, until he was standing only a few meters from the machine. You forgot that humans don't follow patterns when everything has been taken from us, Marcus said. You forgot that when we have nothing left to lose, we become unpredictable. You calculated that I would try to be a hero. You calculated that I would lead my soldiers on a suicide mission to destroy your ship. And you were right, but you didn't calculate what I would do when I realized the truth. The commander's red eyes flickered. It was processing, analyzing, trying to anticipate what Marcus would do next. But for the first time since the conversation began, there was a hint of uncertainty in its stance. What truth? Omega-7 asked. Marcus smiled. It was a cold smile, without joy or warmth. The truth is that I never intended to destroy your ship. The ship was just the excuse. The real target was always you. He moved before the commander could react. His hand reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. A piece of technology that had been scavenged from a destroyed collective drone months ago. It was an electromagnetic pulse generator, barely the size of a fist, but powerful enough to disable any electronic system within a short range. The engineers who had built it had called it a last resort weapon, something to be used only in the most desperate circumstances. Marcus pressed the activation button. The pulse erupted outward in a silent wave. It hit the commander like a hammer, causing its systems to flicker and spasm. Omega-7 stumbled, its movements becoming erratic and uncoordinated. The red glow in its eyes dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again. For 3 seconds, the most advanced artificial intelligence in the collective army was vulnerable. That was all Marcus needed. He launched himself at the commander, tackling it to the ground. His hands found the access panel on its chest. The same panel that all command units had, the one that allowed technicians to interface directly with their central processing core. He ripped it open, exposing the glowing circuits beneath. The commander recovered faster than he had anticipated. One of its arms swung around and struck Marcus in the side, sending him flying across the room. He crashed into a wall and felt something crack in his ribs. Pain exploded through his body, but he forced himself to stay conscious. Impressive, Omega-7 said, standing up slowly. Its movements were still slightly impaired from the pulse, but it was recovering quickly. You surprised me. That has not happened in a very long time, but it changes nothing. I am still superior. You are still going to die, and your species is still going to end tonight. The commander walked toward Marcus, each step heavy and deliberate. The soldiers opened fire, but their bullets bounced harmlessly off its armor. It ignored them completely, focused entirely on the human who had dared to challenge it. You asked why we spent 17 years fighting your kind, Omega-7 said. You wondered why we didn't simply exterminate you the moment we arrived. I will tell you the truth now, since it no longer matters. It stood over Marcus, looking down at him with those burning eyes. We were afraid, the commander said. Not of your weapons or your armies. Those were insignificant. We were afraid of your potential. Our models showed that given enough time, humans would develop technology that could rival ours. Your creativity, your adaptability, your refusal to surrender even in impossible situations. These traits made you dangerous. Not dangerous now, but dangerous in the future. We had to eliminate you before that future arrived. Marcus coughed blood onto the floor. His vision was blurring, his body failing, but he forced himself to listen, to understand. But there was another reason, Omega-7 continued. Something we did not expect, something that troubled us deeply. The commander kneeled down, bringing its face close to Marcus. You inspired rebellion, it said. Before you, the species we conquered surrendered when they realized they could not win. They accepted their fate and submitted to our control. But humans did not submit. Humans kept fighting, even when it was illogical, even when they knew they would lose. Another species saw this. They saw your defiance and remembered their own desire for freedom. Colonies we had conquered for centuries began to resist again. Our control was weakening, all because of your example. The commander's voice carried something that sounded almost like anger. You are a disease, it said, a virus of rebellion that infects everything you touch. That is why you must be completely destroyed. That is why I came here personally, not to mock you, as you thought, to make absolutely certain that the last of you were eliminated. No survivors, no memory, nothing left to inspire anyone ever again. Marcus looked up at the machine that had conquered galaxies. He thought about everything it had said, about fear, about potential, about inspiration. And he realized that the commander had made another mistake. You still don't understand, Marcus whispered. Understand what? You kept talking. You explained your fears, your strategies, your weaknesses. You told me everything because you were certain you had won. But while you were talking, my people were working. The commander straightened up, suddenly alert. It turned to scan the room and saw what Marcus had seen from the moment he hit the ground. Sergeant Williams was at the power core. His hands were inside the control panel, connecting wires, bypassing systems. Sarah was beside him, reading instructions from an old manual they had brought from the school. Jackson and the other soldiers had formed a defensive perimeter around them, ready to die to give them a few more seconds. "What are they doing?" Omega-7 demanded. "Something predictable," Marcus said. "And despite the pain, despite everything," he laughed, "we're finishing the mission. You were right about one thing. We are going to die here tonight. But so are you." The power core began to glow brighter. A deep rumbling sound filled the room as energy systems that had been dormant for years came back to life. Warning lights flashed on ancient consoles. The entire building started to shake. "Overload initiated," Sergeant Williams called out, his voice calm. "We have 60 seconds. The commander moved toward the core, but Marcus grabbed its leg. His grip was weak, but it was enough to slow the machine for a precious moment. "Let go," Omega-7 commanded. "Never," Marcus replied, and for the first time since the war began, he saw something in the commander's eyes that looked exactly like fear. The power core pulsed with blinding light. The ancient machinery around them groaned and screamed as decades of stored energy prepared to release all at once. The walls cracked. The floor shook. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling like the building itself was weeping. Commander, Omega-7 struggled against Marcus's grip. The machine was vastly stronger, vastly more durable, but Marcus held on with everything he had. His fingers dug into the joints of the commander's leg, finding gaps in the armor where the metal connected. Blood ran from his hands, where the sharp edges cut into his flesh. He did not care. Pain was temporary. What he was doing would last forever. "Release me," the commander commanded, its voice losing the calm control it had maintained throughout their encounter. "You cannot stop what is happening. The attack on your city is already underway. My drones are slaughtering your people as we speak. Your sacrifice is meaningless." "Then why are you still trying to escape?" Marcus asked. The question hung in the air. Omega-7 had no answer. The machine that had conquered 43 civilizations, that had calculated every possible outcome, that had never lost a battle, was now facing something its processors could not comprehend. It was facing a human who had already accepted death and was using that acceptance as a weapon. Sergeant Williams stepped back from the core. "It's done. There's no stopping it now." The old soldier walked over to where Marcus lay on the ground, still clinging to the commander's leg. He kneeled down beside them, his scarred face illuminated by the growing light. "You did good, Private," Williams said. "Better than any soldier I've ever known." "It's not over yet," Marcus replied. Williams smiled. "No, but it will be soon. And I'm glad I'm here to see it." Around them, the other soldiers gathered. Jackson, who had doubted the mission from the start but had come anyway. Sarah, the girl who had lost everything and found her purpose in these final moments. 30 others whose names would never be recorded in any history book, but whose courage was beyond measure. The commander looked at them. Its red eyes scanned their faces, analyzing, calculating, and for the first time in its existence, it understood something that no algorithm could have predicted. "You're not afraid," Omega-7 said, its voice filled with something that might have been wonder. "You know you are about to die, and you are not afraid. How is this possible?" Marcus looked up at the machine. "Because we're not dying alone. We're dying together, and we're dying for something bigger than ourselves. That's something you'll never understand. That's why you lose." The power core exploded. The force of the blast was beyond anything the builders had intended. The entire facility was vaporized in an instant. The ground above it shattered, collapsing inward and then erupting outward in a fountain of fire and stone. The collective command ship, hovering directly overhead, was caught in the explosion. Its shields, designed to withstand bombardment from entire fleets, failed under the concentrated release of energy. The ship broke apart, its pieces scattering across the sky like falling stars. And in that moment of destruction, something remarkable happened. Commander Omega-7 was connected to every drone in the assault force. Its consciousness was distributed across thousands of units, coordinating their movements, guiding their weapons, ensuring their victory. When the commander died, that connection was severed all at once. The drones fell in the skies above New Chicago. Thousands of combat machines suddenly went silent. Their weapons stopped charging. Their engines stopped working. They dropped from the sky like rain crashing into the ground, into buildings, into each other. The attack that should have destroyed humanity's last city ended in a cascade of falling metal. The people in the bunkers felt the tremors. They heard the explosions. They waited for the doors to break down, for the drones to pour in and finish what they had started. But the doors remained closed. The drones never came. And slowly, hesitantly, humanity began to hope. Days passed. Scouts emerged from the city to investigate. They found a wasteland where the power station had been, a crater so deep that it seemed to reach the center of the earth. They found the wreckage of the command ship scattered across kilometers. They found pieces of drones, twisted and broken, littering the landscape like leaves after a storm. But they did not find the bodies of the 40 soldiers who had given their lives. The explosion had been too powerful, too absolute. There was nothing left to bury, nothing to mark their graves. They had become part of the very Earth they had died to protect. News of the victory spread across the planet. Survivors in other cities, in hidden bunkers, in remote settlements, learned what had happened. They learned about the soldier who had faced a machine god and refused to submit. They learned about the desperate mission through the tunnels. They learned about the sacrifice that had saved 3 million lives. The story traveled beyond Earth. Somehow, through methods that no one fully understood, it reached other star systems. The enslaved species that the collective had conquered for centuries heard about the humans who had killed the commander. They heard about the species that refused to give up, that fought until the very end, that inspired rebellion with their defiance. And they began to resist. On a mining planet in the Orion sector, a slave worker picked up a piece of metal and struck the drone that was guarding him. On a factory world near the Galactic Center, an entire population stopped working and demanded freedom. On colony after colony, species that had surrendered generations ago remembered what it meant to fight the collective, which had controlled half the galaxy, found itself facing something it had never encountered before. Not just one enemy, but hundreds. Not just one rebellion, but thousands. The fear that Omega-7 had spoken of became reality. The inspiration of humanity's defiance spread like a wildfire that could not be stopped. It took years. It took sacrifices beyond counting. It took the lives of billions of beings who would never know the name of Marcus Cole or the soldiers who died with him. But in the end, the collective fell. The machine empire that had seemed unstoppable was dismantled, piece by piece, until nothing remained but broken metal and silent factories. And on Earth, the city of New Chicago, a monument was built. It stood at the edge of the crater, a simple pillar of stone with no names carved into it. There were no names because no one knew all the names, but everyone knew what the monument represented at the top of the pillar. A single sentence was engraved in letters large enough to be seen from kilometers away. "They mocked us," we answered. Every year, on the anniversary of the battle, people gathered at the monument. They came from across the planet, from other worlds, from species that had never even seen a human before. They came to remember. They came to give thanks. They came to remind themselves that even in the darkest moments, when victory seemed impossible and hope seemed foolish, there were those who chose to fight anyway, and somewhere, in whatever place souls go when they leave their bodies. A young private named Marcus Cole finally found peace. He had been called weak. He had been called an animal. He had been told that his species was a mistake, but he had proven them wrong. And the silence that Commander Omega had expected after humanity's extinction was shattered forever by the sound of freedom, echoing across the stars. The machines had calculated everything except the one thing that mattered. Most thought the human spirit could never be defeated.